Up next, we have our first of 3 applied technical talks by Dr. Pallavi Chitturi. Dr. Chitturi is a research professor in the Department of Statistics and director of the Center for Statistical Analysis at Temple University. She will go over her work on discrete choice experiments and their applications in data privacy. So quick reminder, please mute yourself and turn off your video. If you have questions throughout the talk, post them in the chat and we'll do Q&A just like the last one. So welcome, Pallavi.
Hi, Carly. Can you see me and you can hear me well?
Yes, all is great.
Great, wonderful. If there are any issues, if you feel like my audio or video is breaking up, just unmute your mic, jump right in and let me know. I can always, turn off my video and continue. So I am going to share my screen. Okay. Wonderful. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. My name is Pallavi Chitturi. I'm a professor of statistical science at Temple University. That was a really interesting panel on the challenges of data. When I teach a class in data analytics, I tell my students that analyzing data is an art and a science. But I think this is the first time I've heard it referred to as a dance. That was such a cool idea. I think I may steal that. I may use that in one of my classes. So that was a very interesting panel. I think it's going to be a hard act to follow with the technical talk, but hopefully, this will be interesting. Please do put your questions in the chat, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So my talk is arranged in 2 parts. The first half of the talk just gives you an overview on discrete choice experiments. Discrete choice experiments are also known as CBC, choice-based conjoint analyses. And then in the second half, I will talk a little bit about applications of discrete choice experiments or CBC in the area of data privacy on social networking sites. So, we like to say that in real life, people reveal their preferences through the choices they make. And the aggregate of our choices constitutes the demand for goods and services and even the vote for political candidates. So there are many areas where understanding how changes in the attributes of a product or service may affect consumer choice. Right? So we're talking about a scenario where we want to understand if changing the attributes of a product or a service would impact consumer choice. And it could be a basic product that we use every day, a laptop, a cell phone, a car. It could be a service. It could be a job offer or a tour package. But there are many areas where we want to understand consumer choice and how changing attributes of a product or service may impact human choice. This is just a brief list of some publications. The first one is a book that I was fortunate to write with Professor Ragharao and Wiley at Temple University. They've done a lot of work in this area. And then after that are just a few recent papers in the area of discrete choice experiments. And I would be happy to share some of these references with you later. Okay, so when we talk about, measuring consumer choice, these are called valuation studies. And probably the 2 most common methodologies are traditional conjoint analyses and the more recent, more popular choice-based conjoint. And choice-based conjoint CBC are also called discrete choice experiments. So traditional conjoint analyses has been around for a long time. There was a very early paper by Luce and Tukey that's considered the origin of conjoint analyses. But more recently, choice-based conjoint is becoming more popular. And regardless of whether you use the conjoint analyses approach or the choice-based conjoint analyses approach. In both cases, we're talking about products or services that can be described in terms of their attributes. So for example, a laptop may have many attributes, right? You might be interested in the price of the laptop, the weight of the laptop, processing speed, battery capacity, and so on. Similarly, if you talk about a job offer can be described in terms of its attributes, right? The attributes of a job offer would, of course, be compensation, salary, but it could also be number of vacation days, pension or no pension, health benefits, and so on. So we're talking about products or services that can be described in terms of their attributes that we call factors or attributes. In the traditional conjoint analyses approach, respondents were asked to sort, rank, or rate a set of profiles. Each profile represents a product or a service, right? So a profile represents a distinct product or service, and these profiles are experimentally designed. So they're designed using some basic DOE, design of experiments principles, factorial designs, and so on. And in the traditional conjoint approach, respondents would rank or rate a set of profiles. So the data you get are ranking data or rating data. So more recently, choice-based conjoint is becoming more popular. Rather than the traditional conjoint analyses, CBC is becoming more popular. Instead of asking respondents to rank or rate a set of profiles, we simply ask them, pick the one you like the best. Okay, so presented with a choice set consisting of many profiles, where say each profile represents a laptop or each profile represents a car. You present respondents with a choice set of profiles and say, pick the one you like the best, okay? And the idea behind this is choice-based conjoint is considered a more realistic scenario if you think about it as consumers, right? Let's say I want to buy a jacket. So I go to Kohl's, I want to buy a jacket. I may look at 4 or 5 jackets, and then I pick the one I like the best. If I'm looking at 4 or 5 jackets, I may not necessarily rank or rate all of them and say, this one is my top choice, but this one is my second, this one is my third, this one is my fourth, right? Typically, we evaluate products and then we pick the one we like the best. So choice-based conjoint is considered more realistic. There are many advantages of this CBC approach. As I said, the data collection involves simulated decisions, which is considered a more realistic and simpler task. Also, another key advantage of this CBC or choice-based conjoint approach is that it forces respondents to make trade-offs, right? So think about this. As a consumer, I would like to optimize every attribute of a product or a service. So if I want to buy a laptop, I would like to purchase a laptop that is not too expensive, that has a very high processing speed, that has high battery capacity, that is not too heavy. So I would like to optimize every attribute of that product or service. And that may not be realistic, right? Just due to maybe cost or design constraints, that may not be realistic. The choice-based conjoint approach forces respondents to make trade-offs. So for example, if you had to make a trade-off between the price of the laptop and the weight of a laptop, which attribute is more important to you? So that's another advantage of this approach. And finally, the third advantage is it allows us to measure interactions. So very often consumer choice may not depend upon just specific attributes of a product. It may depend on a particular combination of attributes, right? So it may not just be price or just weight of a laptop. It may be some specific combination of price and weight. So CBC allows us to estimate what we call main effects and interactions. So usually at this point, after talking for a few minutes, I like to pause and say, are there any questions? But I know we don't have necessarily the ability to mute and unmute. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and I will be sure to save some time at the end of the presentation to discuss any questions you might have. The data we get from choice-based conjoint experiments are proportions, right? So what proportion picked a particular profile from a choice set? So if I'm showing respondents a choice set with 3, 4, or 5 laptops, what proportion picked laptop number 1? What proportion picked laptop number 2? So the data you get are proportions, and the data is analyzed. Since the data is proportions, they're analyzed using multinomial logit or probit models. There's an interesting article by Louvier and Woodward that describes the advantages of this approach. Okay, so that was just a brief introduction to choice-based conjoint. The next few slides, I'm going to go into a little more details about the CBC approach, and then we'll talk in particular about the application to data privacy in social networking sites. So in choice-based conjoint analyses, we look at the attributes of a product or service and we divide them into benefits and costs, right? So a benefit would be something for which your preference increases with increasing attribute level. So if you think about the laptop example, a benefit would be processing speed and battery capacity, because I would like processing speed to be higher, to be faster. I would like the battery to last longer. So my preference would increase with increasing attribute level. A cost is something for which preference would increase with decreasing attribute level. So in a laptop, the weight of the laptop would be a cost, right? I would like the laptop to weigh less. So the weight of the laptop, the price of the laptop would be a cost. So the attributes are considered as economic choices, costs or benefits. So here's a little example. Okay, so I just made this up. This is just a small example to illustrate the idea of Pareto optimal subsets. When you're looking at a choice set, so this would actually be a choice set consisting of two profiles. The first profile is a laptop that has a 3 gigahertz processing speed, an 8-hour battery, and it only weighs 3 pounds. The second choice or profile in this choice set is a laptop that has 2 gigahertz processing speed, only 6-hour battery, and it weighs more, 5 pounds. Okay, so if I present this choice, if I'm designing the CBC survey and I present this very simple choice set, what do you think? Which profile would respondents pick? Most respondents would pick the first profile, right? Most respondents would pick this first profile. It has a faster processing speed, it has a longer lasting battery, and it only weighs 3 pounds. So most people would pick the first profile because it dominates the second profile on every attribute. So this is what we mean when we say choice sets should not have dominating or dominated attributes. If you present this choice set to respondents, the vast majority will pick laptop number 1. You really don't learn anything about how consumers make trade-offs. So instead of this choice, how about this one? Right, so take a minute to look at that choice of 2 laptops. If you're presented with this choice, which laptop would you choose? Right, the first one has a faster processing speed, 8-hour battery, but it's also heavier. It weighs 5 pounds. The second one has a lower processing speed, 8-hour battery, but it's lighter. It weighs only 3 pounds. Right, so now in this choice, it really depends. If consumers value processing speed more than the weight of a laptop, they will pick the first profile. But if consumers value weight, like I hate carrying a heavy laptop back and forth to campus, I don't like carrying a heavy laptop if I'm traveling, so I may be willing to give up on processing speed in order to have a lighter laptop. Right? So this is what we mean by a Pareto optimal subset. A Pareto optimal subset does not have dominating or dominated profiles. So this is a key idea when designing CBC studies, is to come up with choice sets that are Pareto optimal, that do not have dominating or dominated profiles. This is just a formal definition. It says, if you're considering 2 profiles, profile X and profile Y, they should exist subscripts such that Xi is less than Yi and Xj is greater than Yj, right? In other words, if you're comparing two profiles, there should be some attributes that are better in profile 1 and some attributes that are better in profile 2. So no one profile dominates others in PO subsets. Okay. So that was just, kind of an introduction, overview of discrete choice experiments or choice-based conjoint analyses and the idea of Pareto optimal subsets. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is really, how would you apply this discrete choice experiment when studying data privacy on social networking sites? I mean, the entire purpose, the goal of social networking sites is to help people connect and communicate, right? So the default settings are usually public, in other words, wide open. Now, it is possible in many of these OSNs that you can actually adjust the privacy setting. But people may not know how to adjust privacy settings. They may not be savvy enough. Maybe they don't care. So this has led to privacy concerns, right? There was a very high profile case, I remember in July of 2020, it was July of last year, where the Twitter account of Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Kanye West, Bill Gates had their Twitter accounts hacked, and a misleading message about Bitcoins and cryptocurrency was posted on their Twitter accounts. The message was, quickly taken down, but in just those few minutes, thousands of people had responded to that. So there has been an increase in privacy concerns related to social networking sites, and really it's a subset. It's a subset of the overall idea of data privacy involving the right of mandating personal privacy. In other words, storage, repurposing, provision to third parties, displaying information via the internet, and so on. So this definition comes from Meehan, and there has been some early work by Pugh and Grasslags and by Krasnova et al. Just this idea of valuation studies to see how consumers value their privacy on social networking sites, and how they value privacy in relation to other attributes of OSNs. So, as we know, almost all social networking sites are free, right? And we get this free service in return for online advertising and personalized banners and so on, which has led to a growth in privacy abuse claims. So with this research, we hope to answer some questions such as, would users be willing to pay a small fee, right? Instead of a free social network, if you had to pay a small monthly fee for enhanced privacy, would users be willing to pay for privacy? Or are they willing to accept some privacy violations in order to have this free service? And are there differences in user groups based on age and gender? Do different groups have different privacy valuations? So in order to address these questions, we can use a discrete choice experiment, or CBC. Okay, so this is an OSN or online social network example. So please take a minute just to review this. We actually did a pre-study where we considered many attributes, up to 10 attributes of social networking sites. And then, based on that pre-survey, we narrowed our attention down to these 4 attributes. But there were many other, additional attributes considered in that pre-study. For example, the number of ads you see per page, the number of data breaches that OSN has experienced in the past 1 year, photo to text ratio, and so on. So we considered many different attributes or factors of a social networking site. And we've now narrowed our attention down to these 4 attributes, being price. Price could be, a free social networking site or a small fee of $5 per month. Network popularity. So only about 50% of your friends use this social networking site versus 75% use the site. Availability of privacy controls can be basic. In other words, it's either wide open to the public, or you can do friends only, or the higher level would be something that you can customize. So you can choose which group sees what content. So some content might be public, other content can only be viewed by friends, certain content can be viewed by colleagues, and so on, right? And also information use by provider. Information use can be basic. So the provider of the OSN is only using name, age, date of birth, basic information, or it could be complex. So it could be that the OSN provider is actually using algorithms to come up with these complex profiles of their users, which are then sold to third parties, right? So each of these factors has two levels, one being the high level. So the high level is one, that's the more desirable level, and then the low level is 0, right? So if you ask users of social networking sites, they would like to optimize on all levels, right? So everyone would like to have a social networking site that is free, that is used by a vast majority of their friends, that has customizable privacy controls, and information use is only basic, it's not complex. So we would like to optimize on all levels, but that may not be realistic. So what we can do in this scenario is use a discrete choice experiment. The discrete choice experiment would force respondents to make trade-offs, right? And this cannot be determined by asking about each attribute separately. But if you create these OSN profiles and ask them to choose, it would force users to make trade-offs. And that gives the researcher more insight. Do OSN users value privacy more than popularity? Do they value popularity more than privacy controls or information use, and so on? Okay, so as I said, we have 4 attributes and each attribute has 2 levels. So remember, 0 is the low level, 1 is the high, more desirable level, right? So we're using 0 for the low level, 1 for the high level. So we can use the idea of, factorial experiments. For those of you who are familiar with factorial experiments, we can use some of these ideas to set up these choice sets. If you look at this choice set, each profile represents a social networking site, right? So the first one would be a social networking site in which you have to pay $5. So price is at the low level. You actually have to pay $5, but all other attributes are at the high level, right? So in the first 3 profiles, you have one attribute at the low, less desirable level, but the last profile has all 4 attributes at the high level. Everyone is going to pick this one, right? Everyone is going to pick the social networking site where they can optimize all 4 attributes of that SNS, okay, or OSN. You can call it online social networking or social networking site. But everyone will pick the last one. We say the last profile is a dominating profile because all 4 attributes are at the high level. It's not Pareto optimal. How about this one? Right? Is this Pareto optimal? Again, if you look at this choice set, the first 3 profiles, you have 3 attributes at the high level. But in the last one, you only have 2 attributes at the high level. No one is going to pick this. Nobody is going to pick this profile when they have this option available, right? That has 3 factors at the high level. So it's not Pareto optimal. Right, so this is the idea we discussed earlier, that choice sets should not have dominating or dominated profiles. So in this particular example, because I have 4 attributes at 2 levels each, we can actually set up Pareto optimal subsets. I'm keeping an eye on time, so I'm not going to go into the details, but the idea here is you can always set up a Pareto optimal subset if the levels in each profile sum to the same number. So this choice set is called S2. This choice set is called S2 because in each profile, the levels sum to the same number 2. In each profile, you have two factors or two attributes at the high level and two factors or two attributes at the low level. Now, if you present me with this choice set, I have to make a choice, right? This forces me to make a trade-off. If price and popularity are more important to me, I will pick this one. This profile has price and popularity at the high level. However, if someone else looks at this choice set and says, you know, it's really important for me to have privacy controls, and I do not want the OSN provider to share my information, they may pick this profile, right? But this choice set is forcing you to make trade-offs. You cannot optimize all attribute levels. So this would be a Pareto optimal choice set. I do want to keep some questions open. I do want to keep some time open for questions at the end. So Michelle, can you let me know if I have a few more minutes? Should I pause here? What do you think?
It looks like we have two questions. So I think, Madeline, you want to go ahead and get started with the first one?
Sure. Thank you, Pallavi. If you want to take one more minute to wrap up before I go in with the question, that's completely fine. Do you want to do that?
Thank you.
Okay.
That'll be perfect. I'll just take a minute and wrap up. And basically, you know, the idea here is that we want to estimate what we call the main effects of those four attributes of interest. So there has been some research that you need to have at least two. You need to have at least two choice sets in order to be able to estimate main effects. So in this particular example, the two choice sets we will use are these. And the first choice set is called S1. The levels sum to the same number 1. This one is called S3. They are both Pareto optimal. There are no dominating or dominated profiles. And then, you know, the respondents who participate in this study will be divided into two groups. One group will get choice set S1. The next group will get choice set S3. We also include what's called a no choice option. So if you don't like any of the profiles in the choice set, you can pick the no choice option. And, you know, finally, to conclude, we would like to answer, we hope that this research will answer some questions like, you know, which attributes or factors are most important to users of, you know, social networking sites? Will they show an aversion to a paid site? You know, will they appreciate enhanced privacy controls, and what kind of trade-offs would they be willing to make in this scenario? So thank you, everyone. And any questions I would be happy to address.
Thank you, Pallavi. This was really super interesting. We do have a few questions that we can get to quickly. So first, we have a really interesting questions asking about how you feel about proposals discussions around changing our voting structure to ranked choice, for instance, given the political climate and the advantages you noted on choice-based conjoint.
Wow, that's a very interesting question. That's a very interesting question. And I'm sorry, but I don't think I'm really qualified to answer that question. You know, I think somebody mentioned in the previous, in the challenges of data talk, that there is no unicorn, you know, that one person who has expertise in all areas. So I would have to defer that question to somebody who has more of an experience in, you know, in political science. That's one application. So there have been studies that have used conjoint analyses and even choice-based conjoint in this scenario, right? The vote for political candidates. Unfortunately, that's not an area that I am familiar with. So I apologize for not being able to answer that question.
No, that's really a big question. We have someone asking about what an application of Pareto optimal could be for marketing. Have you worked on anything like that?
Yes, so actually, both CBC and the traditional conjoint are very popular in marketing, and some of the early papers came out of the marketing department. So if you look at papers, for example, by Green and Srinivasan, these were marketing faculty who wrote some of the early papers in conjoint analyses and choice-based conjoint. Very popular in marketing, because if you think about it, we're really trying to understand consumer preference. These are valuation studies, right? And they're used to study both products and services. So the product could be, the example I used was a laptop, but it could be a car, it could be a cell phone, it could be a jacket. I remember reading a paper where they had looked at the attributes of yogurt. What are the attributes of yogurt that are most important to consumers? Or it could be the attribute of a service, like a tour package. So, when I'm traveling and I'm going on a tour, what are the attributes of a tour package that are most important to consumers? Is it the flight? Is it the quality of the room? The local tours? Does the room have a view or no view? So anytime you want to understand consumer choice, how do consumers make trade-offs? How would changing the attributes of a product impact consumer choice? You can use conjoint analyses or choice-based conjoint. So very popular, very widely used in marketing.
Pallavi, thank you so much for this wonderful talk. We do have a few other questions, but we will send them your way because we do have to move on to the next talk. But thank you for your great examples. You really taught us like how to learn the concept on a higher level, which was amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. Do I need to do anything to stop sharing, or you will take over at this point?
You could just, so at the top where you share it, just there's like a little X, just click that and you should be able to stop sharing. Just so Carly can hop. Perfect. You're good.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.